So this is my talk. Thank you so much for coming. We just did real quick introductions, and I'm just so honored to have our community here. Es un honor tenerlos a ustedes aquí. Es una bendición, además, tenerlos a ustedes aquí, porque son parte de esta iniciativa tan importante, ¿verdad?, que queremos lograr. And I'm going to be talking about the initiative that really motivates your presence, many of your presence here, but also just this work in general. It's part of a big context, and so this is going to go fast, okay? It's hard to do in even just a few minutes, but I'll do the best that I can. The statement of the problem. What is the problem, right? Well, some will say it's achievement, but if you think about it, it's really not achievement. Achievement is a symptom of a deeper problem, right? So the symptom is what I call in my own work subtractive schooling, the structured silences in the curriculum, right? The lack of capacity in the curriculum that we currently have in our public school systems as a whole. There are exceptions, but as a whole, it doesn't speak to the histories, the cultures, the experiences, the identities of the students, right? So it doesn't motivate them. There's many ways to address this problem. One way to address it that research finds is very, very positive and constructive is ethnic studies. And I'll define that in the course of this talk. I'll talk about the scope, like where is it, where do we find it, how extensive, right? What the research says, only a little bit. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about the research, and I'll talk about some sources that I can refer you to. What are the goals? What are the aims? State and local efforts, and then a local initiative, Academia Cuautli, which means eagle. It's Nahuatl for eagle, Academia Cuautli. And it's a Saturday academy that we have at the MIS Barrientos, Mexican American Culture Center, that nuestro grupo, that I just introduced you to, together with our teachers and principals and community are involved in. And growing our own educators, that's a very important idea, and I'll come back to that. So here's what I just said. The problem is subtractive schooling. My first book was based on that. And so what we need is an additive, an asset-based, not one that is, not an education that is based on what students don't know, but on what they know and what they can bring to our educational contexts. There's a long history of culturally relevant pedagogy and education. I think the first most influential text in the more contemporary moment is Gloria Ladson-Billings' Dream Keepers. And if you haven't read it, you really should read that. And she distinguishes between culturally relevant pedagogy, teaching, and assimilationist pedagogy, with assimilationist not being helpful, and then teachers that teach differently along those lines, culturally relevant or assimilationist. There's also volumes and volumes, and that's what that big bookshelf suggests, volumes and volumes of multicultural education, literature. The problem is it's not in our schools. That's the problem. A number of us are involved in battles right now precisely around that, and I'll speak to that shortly. In terms of battles, Arizona has been the key battleground for, in particular, Mexican American studies. And that has to do with a history. I don't have time to go into it, but it's a long and winding one that has to do with a court-ordered desegregation settlement that included, by 2000, the teaching of Mexican American studies and other ethnic studies in the Tucson Unified School District. And it was taught K through 12. They developed curriculum, aligned the curriculum to state standards, developed pedagogy around it, and it resulted in amazing kinds of outcomes, including a lot of students who would probably have would have failed had they not taken ethnic studies, not only not failing, but going on to college and pursuing higher education. They acquired through ethnic studies that academic identity that's so important. If you don't acquire that academic identity, then you don't have that sense of self-efficacy that you really can be successful in the college classroom. And what makes ethnic studies so successful is that it is very much about preparing young people for college-level instruction. I mean, you really cannot separate college preparedness from ethnic studies, because that is exactly how it is reflected in every place that I certainly know of where it is taught. The premier ethnic studies program in the country, aside from Arizona, which now has been dismantled since 2010, 2011. There's a court case right now. I believe that we're going to win this one, but the premier ethnic studies program has been in the San Francisco Unified School District, and it's not just teaching a curriculum about cultures, right? But it involves a pedagogy. It's a way of teaching. It's a social justice pedagogy. It connects to students' needs, communities' needs, wishes, desires, right? It connects to all these things that are important to young people in a meaningful way. Precious Knowledge. If you haven't seen that movie, I think it's one of the best documentaries that you can see that is about the Arizona ethnic studies experience, that tells really well through video why it was so awesome, why it was so good. Well, they ignited something. Now, ethnic studies, it has a long history, okay? But the most contemporary aspects are what I'm showing you today. The deeper lineages have to do with civil rights, the 1960s, the 1970s, and multicultural education is the K-12, the K-12 analog to the higher education ethnic studies. So as you had in the 60s and 70s, Mexican American studies, Native American and Indigenous studies, you had African American studies. As you had all of these programs rolling out, well, it then had an impact on the K-12 system with multicultural education courses, as they're called in K-12, being taught, but basically coming directly out of the knowledge production of the universities, which is another reason they prepare you for college, because there's a direct linkage between what universities do and what it gets taught in multicultural education classrooms. So what happened in Arizona, I mean, y'all can go back to Senate Bill 2010, House Bill 2281, back in 2010, 2011, and we were all really enraged, right? I mean, if you were in tune with what was going on in Arizona, Senate Bill 2010 was the Show Me Your Papers bill, right? And of course, that's what we just passed in the state of Texas with Senate Bill 4. That said, one thing that is very clear from this long and winding history is that the community has always resisted this kind of oppression. And Arizona's our soulmates. A lot of us have families across the Southwest. We have deep roots and linkages, colleagues. And so Tony Diaz started this Libro Traficante movement. And he joined Texas to Arizona, and they had traffic stops. And everywhere that they would go, they would give books. They were trafficking in multicultural education books that spoke to the histories of the Mexican-American community of the Southwest. And so Arizona was on the stop, but they've been trafficking in books. Isn't that beautiful? And so in New Mexico, what you have is also a strong movement, particularly in Albuquerque. What you see is a committee that's set up to investigate ethnic studies as part of the core curriculum for the state of Nuevo Mexico, New Mexico. And Texas, some of you have either been involved or you're aware of the racist textbook that was recently denied. It was something that was challenged in the September and in the November meetings of the last State Board of Education meetings. Some of you were there. Can you raise your hand if you were actually present? Yeah, okay, well, some of you were there. And this involved a campaign that involved centers associated with scholars in Mexican American Studies under the aegis, under the banner of the National Association for Chicano Studies, Chicana and Chicano Studies, Tejas Foco. So you have this national association, and then you have these chapters. So Texas is a big state, so the Texas chapter is huge. It's massive, and it's throughout Texas. And so you'll see, if you know people here from San Antonio, from the Valley, from Houston, from Dallas, from El Paso, from all over. the state of Texas. And it was a good number, I think, in both sets of testimonies, in the September meeting as well as in the November meeting. I think there were, how many? Someone tell me, certainly over 100 each time lined up. These were day-long kinds of events, and almost near unanimously against this racist textbook that described Mexicans as a threat to American democracy, as lazy. I mean, can you imagine calling Mexicans lazy? You can call us anything, but don't call us lazy. We work too hard for that, right? We're not lazy, all right? We're not lazy people. And it's really worse than that, right, Emilio? We don't even want to talk about it. It's just ugly, ugly stuff. It would have set us back, I'm telling you, if this book had squeaked through to the 1940s, 1950s. So I've mentioned the Knox Tejas Foco group. So the agenda, that's the title of the talk, is spearheaded by this organization, but of course involves coalitions. It involves others that are also equally concerned or that are allied to the cause, right? But it also is an agenda for ethnic studies literature, or language arts, and ethnic studies social studies to get taught in our K-12 public education system. I mean, I think it should get taught in utero, right? I mean, if we have Mozart in utero, right? Well, I think we should have ethnic studies in utero. It involves culturally relevant social justice pedagogy. It involves growing our own educators. So you hear this phrase a lot, grow your own, and it refers, from my world, from our world, to not just creating pathways, although that's really great because we do have an equity issue. We have a severe underrepresentation of Latino, African American, Asian American, and Native American and indigenous teachers in our public school system. But it's also about growing consciousness, right? It's critical consciousness. That's what this book is about. It's a curriculum for higher education teacher preparation. So what this book consists of is, thank you so much, is people from throughout the United States for years, people that you would know, Sonia Nieto, Luis Moll, a number of our elders in education saying, we really need to devise a curriculum for higher education for the future teachers of Latino and Latina children. And so this reflects the wisdom of that group, and this was lots of meetings, and it reflected what they were also doing. So we see that Grow Your Own programs exist throughout the country, Grow Your Own pathways. They exist in our own community, immediate community, exist in Sacramento, but also in Milwaukee, Chicago, Brooklyn, and Dallas. Dallas right now is working on building a superhighway into the bilingual education teaching profession. And so that's a work that's underway that looks very, very promising because they have great need. And we all have great need for bilingual education teachers. So that work is very exciting. I think another thing that's important to mention is epistemological freedom. That's a big word. It took me many years to just say that word, but epistemology refers to ways of knowing. I mean, ways of knowing is a very, very broad idea, but it could include such things as spirituality, right? I mean, what we do is sacred. Working with children, working with your children. That's how we think about it. We think about our work as very sacred. And so it's important to develop other ways of thinking and talking about our children and youth that are not banal, that are not technicist and psychometric and that are scientistic, that reduces them to numbers on a piece of paper and hence their values. Their values as individuals, who they are because of how well they score on a test, right? Which is really the direction that the whole education enterprise has gone, unfortunately. And we need to change that. And it's not going to change unless you are a part of that, unless we work together to change that. The achievement gap, that's a low bar. We're talking all the time about eliminating the achievement gap. You know what? That's really a low bar. We want our children to thrive, right? We want our children, we want them to achieve, right? Make good grades. But you know what? We want them to have legacies. because who they are and who their parents and communities, who they are in terms of their cultural wealth that they bring to this society and to this context, which is subjugated, right? It's buried underneath the awful rhetoric, is precisely where we should be focusing our curriculum, our education, our instruction. So that's what's really being communicated here with epistemological freedom. And legitimacy, respect, gosh, Senate Bill 4, that was painful. That was very painful. I'm still in mourning. I mean, that's going to go to trial, and we're going to win that one too, because it's a violation of the Constitution, but people are going to get hurt because of Senate Bill 4, but I'm in mourning. I'm in deep mourning because of that, because it says so much about where we are as people in Texas, and that's sad. What the research says, I do want to, have a conversation with you about what we can do here locally. So I'll just talk for now about the D.N. Penner study, and very briefly. But the D.N. Penner study, I mentioned the premier ethnic studies program in the nation that is out of the San Francisco Unified School District, and it involves a partnership with the ethnic studies program out of the University of California, San Francisco, and it's been a partnership that's been working together for quite a number of years. And D.N. Penner, what's really interesting, they're Stanford social psychologists. Thomas Dee is a professor and Emily Penner, a graduate student. They weren't quite really, when they were studying in San Francisco, interested so much in ethnic studies, but they came across these very interesting findings. And it had to do with 8th grade students that took a 9th grade. They were on a path toward not graduating because they were declining in the rate at which they were accruing credits for graduation. I mean, if students start losing credits in the 9th grade, they're on a path to dropping out. If anything, you should be a little bit above that, right? And accruing credits, or just being average, being with your class. And so it combined half of the class in the 9th grade. This was the framework. This was the model. So half of those students were on a route to dropping out, and the other half were students that actually wanted to take the class. And so the study, the way it was designed as a quantitative empirical analysis, it by the structure of the actual context, it's as close as you can get in quantitative research to a quasi-experimental design study, so that you can determine causality, right? Because the gold standard in quantitative positivistic research is the quasi-experimental design. So you have causality. That's a strong word. But they were so astounded by the findings. What they found was that the students as a whole, that they did very well academically, surprisingly well academically. They looked at 4 cohorts of students, and I believe it was 4, maybe 5 schools. The students, all of a sudden, upon having taken the ethnic studies courses, they were on a route toward graduation. They were accruing credits. Their attendance improved, positive outcomes. The other thing that's very important in this study is that it helps students in other areas of the curriculum that were not even related to ethnic studies, such as in mathematics. There were strong correlations, positive correlations to achievement in mathematics. So it's interesting, right? Because going back to the beginning, what I said is, if we think of achievement as symptomatic of other problems, and if ethnic studies fix those problems, well, then you fix achievement, right? But it's not that simple. You actually have to have a very well-designed ethnic studies program, and we can go into that later. This is, both of these, along with the Cabrera piece, they're published in the top education journal in the country, the American, I think it's the top, right? AERJ, the American Educational Research Journal, or one of the top. And so, I mean, here we have just wonderful, wonderful research. It doesn't promote divisiveness. That's what the evil judges in Arizona were saying, that we have to ban this because it promotes divisiveness, and it's un-American, right? And it makes people want to be against white people, anti-white. And actually, it actually has the opposite effect, and not only on the students, but on the teachers. And Lopez's work refers to that. It's just a really great set of readings. The Sleater text looks at I think 3 decades or so, 3 or 4 decades of ethnic studies. And so that's a very, very good text for understanding what ethnic studies is from an intellectual knowledge production perspective, but also critical. And there's certain tenets that are very important. One of those tenets is that you can't possibly have an ethnic studies course without colonization and teaching about the history of colonization being a part of it. So this is not like soft, right? This is actually critical. It's social justice oriented. It's hard. Now, teaching that doesn't make people feel that they want to attack Anglos or America. It actually has the opposite effect. I mean, there's no evidence that it does otherwise anywhere. And I've spent months reading this literature, catching up. It actually promotes a sense that I am part of the American narrative. I am part of the American story. Right? I'm part of the Texas story. That's so important because all of a sudden through your teaching, you have a sense of belonging. You have a sense of self-esteem, and that this is about me, right? This matters. So you can teach in a way that promotes a positive sense of self and a positive sense of your group without promoting resentment. So these are this is what we've been doing, and I'll just go through this real quickly. I mentioned different strategies. There's a lot of strategies for ethnic studies, and so this is the State Board of Education strategy. This involved a recent testimony before the Committee on Instruction. What they're considering right now is an ethnic studies literature course. So, this is on a good path. I think it might happen. We're hopeful that it will happen. It's involved a legislative strategy. We have 3 bills right now in the Texas House and Senate, and a local strategy. So we have an ethnic studies agenda in the Austin Independent School District, and what that would result in would be by fall 2017, 6 schools in the Austin Independent School District having ethnic studies courses, including the ones that our children in Academia Cuautli are zoned to, Travis and Austin high schools. By the next year, in fall 2018, if things go as scheduled, I trust that they will, all high schools in the school district will have ethnic studies, social studies. I'm on the committee. Is anyone else on the committee? I don't think I see anyone else on the committee. You didn't go to any committee? Yeah. Emilio has been involved in the committee. Sorry. He's been involved. And so you've seen the committee, and you know I'm not lying that the ethnic studies curriculum is awesome. It sings. It's what you would want. It's what I teach, right? It's what you teach. It's social justice, right? It's a pedagogy, right? It's social justice, it's history, it's court cases, it's all the groups, it's concepts, it's race, it's understanding ethnicity, relationship of self to society. It's got an A course and an A part and a B part. The B part is when you do the action research projects. That's what we're calling for. Right? And so that's where we can implement the best of what we know in education. And the best of what we know in education is that the best kind of teaching is teaching in context, right? So what is all of this stuff about taking tests and filling in the blank? What is that? That's nothing. It's not a curriculum, right? That dispossesses youth of their own sense of possibilities, right? Because they're reduced to that act of taking tests. I see a lot of heads nodding, so this was Star Week, right? So bless your hearts. This was Star Week. So, this is really awesome what's happening in our district, and I'm so grateful to Paul Cruz and Edmundo Lopez and others for supporting this. Paul Saldaña as well. This is Academia Cuautli. I have a 2-minute documentary. I'll come back to it, but we formed in September 2013, September 20th, 2013 at the Mexican American Culture Center, and so we developed a vision, and this is our vision, is to honor our community's cultural heritage, foster a social justice consciousness, and reclaim our collective identities in pursuit of educational freedom. Now, that's really an important concept. Remember I talked about epistemological freedom? Well, guess what? We have danza mexica as a part of this, right? The Aztec dancing. I mean, we're free, right? And we're availing ourselves of the opportunities that are in our communities, of the people, the resources. We're free. So when we're free like that, we can develop an organic curriculum, one that reflects who we are. And so I'm not going around the country saying everybody needs to do this. I'm saying, I'm going around the country saying you need to discover your own resources, your own wealth, and be free to discover those resources and to make the connections so that you can offer the children a curriculum that is nourishing, that renews them, right? Renewal, right? Don't you want to be renewed? Don't we all want renewal? Yeah. I mean, it's like you get in the same old rut, and we're made for much more than that, right? As individuals and as communities, we're made for much more than that. And so, so these are the pieces of it. It's a contract. It's a real contract. It's a partnership between Nuestro Grupo. We've got Nuestro Grupo here, the school district, and the Mexican American Culture Center. And so we're renewing the contract right now. In the contract, the schools that we are serving at the 4th grade are Sanchez, Metz, Zavala, and Houston. We've got our Houston parents here. And Cameron, this is the great work that you do as an ESL adult teacher. We're going to be expanding to Perez Elementary. And so this is a co-constructed curriculum. And so Emilio is our main contact guru, a content guru. He's the historian. Well, yeah, you made a face. He's our content guru. He is. And he's actually discovered a skill that he didn't even know he had. And so it's really wonderful because he's able to develop monographs for curriculum writers in the district that are also part of Nuestro Grupo. And they then take that monograph, and it's got major ideas, right, and civil rights and history, overarching themes, and they take it and they break it up into actual curriculum. And it's iterative, so we come back and we revisit it, they present it to us, and it's always ongoing, right? But it's organic, and it's based on discussions, it's based on interests, it's based on what the schools, many of the teachers are either already doing or what they want to do. We prepare the teachers to teach, and then they actually teach it at the school context. And you're welcome. Not all at once, but but you are welcome. It's public. It's open to the public. Our Academia Cuautli school year is roughly from October to April, and so we'll get going again in our 4th year in April. We also have regular Wednesday night meetings, and those have a life unto themselves as well. And you're welcome to our Wednesday evening meetings. Now, this is the Academia Cuautli Educator pathway. It will have another square in here soon for Perez Elementary, but it's a visual, and here is what the dashes are the curricular kinds of impacts that we want to have, right? And so in the 4th grade is where we're getting them, the children from the schools. A bus picks them up and brings them to Academia Cuautli, and takes them home by noon, right? And they get danza mexica, and they get instruction, they get field trips. A lot happens at Academia Cuautli. And then at the 6th grade, I mean, there's a conversation of maybe taking world geography and transforming world geography into ethnic studies. I mean, working within the boundaries that we have. So that's a possibility. These are all conversations that we still have to have, or are in the process of having. And then we have the 9th grade ethnic studies, which in the school district will begin in our schools in the fall. And And then at the 11th grade, dual credit, it could be dual credit or it could be Mexican American Studies or courses at ACC, right? So the idea would be if we create a pathway into the University of Texas, and this is what we have right now, okay? This is what we have. Doesn't mean there's no commitments, there's no decisions. This is, we're still in the creative stage, right? But there is genuine interest, definite genuine interest in these specific components. And so the idea would be to bring students through the pathway into the University of Texas, into the Bilingual Education program. Claudia, Dr. Cervantes soon. Hi. So the idea would be to get them into your program, and also we have social studies represented here. You teach urban education social studies, so that would be at the secondary, middle school, or high school level. And once they finish their programs, they would go back and teach, if they're bilingually certified, in District 2. That's where our schools are. They're in District 2. David Kaufman, our English language director from the Austin Independent School District, just walked in, and so I think he's seen this graph before. Thank you for coming. And then for the urban you teach social studies, they would go back into the high school or maybe the middle school, right? So we're working right now. There's a lot of things I haven't shared, but what I will share is that when you work with teachers and you work very closely in an in-depth manner, they get very creative themselves, and they have their own ideas, right? And so one idea that's massive is to create a space, maybe at the MAC, where we could have a bilingual education / dual language education teacher lab, so that bilingual education teachers from throughout the district, or dual language teachers, can come and look at the teaching of the curriculum to real students in real time. Now, I'm in policy, and one of the things that has always concerned me is the level of impact. People go into policy largely because they want to have big impacts. Well, we are having a big impact. One is by just generating a framework and an idea, right? But another is that the curriculum that we produce is available district-wide. Not all of it, but a sizable amount of it right now in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 11. So what we produce for the fourth graders is available for students at other grade levels. Whether they actually use the curriculum is another matter, and I think we need to work more closely with the district and prepare more teachers. One thing that we've discovered from preparing teachers is that there is the technical part of it, but I think most substantively, what we're doing is actually liberating not only the curriculum, but the Spanish language. The curriculum is taught in Spanish, right? And when you have dual language teachers, and they are, I know not in your school, Susie, but we hear from teachers that say that they're feeling like they're breaking a law just by speaking Spanish when they go to get a drink in the teacher's lounge or something. Like that's a law that they broke, right? And that's like pretty sad. I mean, we don't live in, Maine, right, or Alaska. We actually are a border state, right? And we have a long history with the Mexican American Spanish-speaking community here. And so to have our teachers in a dual language district say to us that they feel that they are breaking the law when they speak Spanish, just going to get a drink of water in the hallway, that's a major problem. So a lot of what we're doing is liberating the Spanish language, liberating the curriculum. Teachers don't know that they can teach about segregation, for example. Oh, can I teach this? Yes, well, that's the history, right? That's part of the story, right? And you absolutely can and should teach about this part of Texas history, right? So a lot of what we're doing is we're just opening up even just, spiritual pathways, psychological, emotional pathways into a curriculum that emancipates. So that's it. I thought that what we could do is, in the few minutes that we have left, is, and we don't have to answer these specific questions, but it's what occurred to me since we have a number of people in the audience. We have our community present. AVE, Bilingual Education, our faculty, nuestro grupo, Principal Garcia. So, I mean, this is a possible conversation that we have. I mean, I think we're missing a lot, but I think we also have a lot, and it's all in process. Terrence, Dr. Green, Dr. Childs, I think the implications for our program, possibly in educational administration, is to create a partnership with bilingual education so that we can, and I talked to Ruben Olivares about this, and it used to exist here in this college, but we could create a partnership so that we can prepare bilingual principals, bilingual, culturally relevant principals, and actually that's what our teachers are asking for. They're looking for pathways into leadership, but not the same old pathway. They're looking for something that actually speaks to what we're already developing. So I think that's another really interesting possibility. Ruben says he has all of the documentation from years past when that happened, and he was part of it. And it was a good program. It produced our bicultural principles. So the beautiful thing about all of this is that it transforms higher education once we bring our institutions into a partnership, right? The community, with the district, with the university, with our centers. It has implications for Mexican American, for all our centers. But I think most importantly, it transforms us as individuals. That's the most beautiful thing about the work that we do, is that I'm not the same person. I know I look the same, I think, but I am not the same person that I was before we started this partnership. And I'm just so grateful, and I feel so blessed to be a part of it. We have so much fun, well, thank you.
Any comments?
I'm really thrilled that to hear that ethnic studies is going to be in 6th grade, because I know that the textbook that they are using right now in Austin, it doesn't have Palestine on the map. It only has Israel. And so, I was asking the students, why they thought that might be, and I just did kind of just showed them images of this is what an Israeli person, this is what a Palestinian looks like, and why do you think, and then they said, well, maybe because one's white and the other one's brown. And so I think that there's a lot of space to read against the text and interrogate some of the ways that, Western European ideas are centered in the curriculum.
Right, and I think in those middle school grades is when you lose a lot of children, but if you can keep them anchored in a sense of their story, their purpose in life, and if you can give them a purpose that's even more concrete, right? That, hey, you're on an actual pathway. We can help them. We can develop ways to mentor them, to tutor them, to offer internship experiences, and to promote this pathway. I mean, out of all of this, other pathways are going to develop. Okay, but education is the most important pathway because it is the pathway to all of the professions. Right? And so this is very strategic. This is a movement. We're in a movement, and it's not just Austin, Texas. I mentioned several places around the country that share this deep concern, but also this real motivation to grow critically conscious teachers. Would you like to offer something, Dr. Cervantes-Soon?
Well, I'm very excited about this work, and especially because I believe that ethnic studies should be inherent in bilingual education as we prepare teachers in bilingual teacher preparation. And for so long we have seen bilingual education as focusing on language development, and it's like strictly almost this cognitive perspective of learning a language, whereas really I think that bilingual education, one of the foundational aspects of it should be this ethnic studies perspective. Absolutely, because bilingual education, the way we have it in the United States, is very different from teaching English overseas. We're really trying to go back to, at least in our program, go back to the origins of bilingual education, which is really, the liberation of our people, right, from these assimilationist educational practices. And so I think that should be inherent in our bilingual education teacher preparation program. And I'm curious to hear if you've seen any programs in the country for bilingual teacher preparation that actually infuse their courses with ethnic studies and critical perspectives, and what your take is on that.
Cal State Sacramento has a long history of doing that, by the way. What they're doing differently now is that they're being more intentional about grow your own, right? So they're actually like maintaining a learning community and really developing a critical mass of teachers. But they've been doing that for a long time. I think grow your own programs are very much philosophically aligned to Paulo Freire, right? To Paulo Freire and to Latson Billings and critical theory, critical frameworks. But I agree, there has to be a joining of the two. But Cal State is excellent, and it's all in Spanish. And one of our teachers from that program is now in Austin, and so she'll be your Fulmore sixth grade teacher. Where maybe I shouldn't say that, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, you'll hear soon. But she really wants to do it, and so that's how you do it, right? It's not like you create a course and then you say, well, who's going to teach it? You actually have to find the people to teach it to build the pathway. Yes, Melissa?
Well, I wanted to let you know that one way, and I started teaching in 1980, but thank God we had a lot of Latino authors and illustrators in children's books that were bilingual. So that's the way that we promoted what I consider la cultura, And now I'm curious to know, and a lot of the bilingual kids were in East Austin at one time, but now because gentrification, we got them way up in the north and we're in the south. But I'm curious to know, in terms of the ethnic studies at different levels, who is involved in writing the curriculum at the different levels? Is it teachers are involved, is it professors, or what? So I'm curious about that.
Well, this is us at the fourth grade level, right? At the sixth grade, it would still be us, because remember our curriculum is in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 11. The issue is whether it's even drawn down. I mean, I know it's on your TeachNet website, and it's not simply something that should be drawn down. You should actually get prepared to teach it. You should understand what motivates this work and who's behind it, and what we're doing in other areas of the elementary school level, right? And at the ninth grade, that is the committee that I'm on, that Emilio and I are on, and it's excellent. And it could be for the ninth or the 10th grade. I want to take that class. It's a class I never had. It's my dream class. At the 11th grade, this is a really interesting thing, because if things go well with the state board, there'll be ethnic studies literature as part of the foundation curriculum for the state of Texas. And so that would be a substitute. That's literature. It's not social studies, it's literature. So it's the books you just talked about, right? And so it would be literature that would be taught at either the 11th or 12th grade that could substitute for the English 3 or 4 requirements in the state of Texas. What also can happen at this level, because I know Travis High School they're an early college career high school, and they're taking dual credit courses. I also know that at Travis High School, they have 50 students. I heard this from the principal. They have 50 students right now, grades 9 through 12, who have chosen a career in teaching. I mean, there's other careers too. They're an early career, 50 of them. And so that's like one of my next visits, to go and talk to them and see what we can coordinate. They don't come to UT. And I'm sure out of 50, we should be able to get a few in, at least, right? I mean, that's pretty sad that they're not coming here. They don't really see UT as a place for them. And maybe they think it's too hard. Maybe they don't apply. Maybe they do apply and they get rejected. Yes, Emilio and then Cameron.
Yeah, I was thinking about the kind of history curriculum project that we had part of this. And one of the things that becomes real obvious is that the teachers have to be intimately involved, obviously, in the writing the curriculum, the testing it and evaluating it and doing. But all the way through, what is even more important than that, I think, is the partnerships that we were building with that project beginning in 2012. A partnership between students that took a course with Cynthia Salinas, undergraduate students that were in the teacher training program that took courses on developing the curriculum. And so I worked with them. And so we had that kind of partnership. And then we brought in Maestria students, the graduate students, and they worked with the undergraduates and with me, the content person, that's what they call me. And I was directing the project as well. But then when we gave the material to the teachers, we did it in a very number of ways. One way is through a curriculum, a professional development workshop, so that they understood what we were doing and why we were doing these things. So they then implemented the material and came back to us with ideas about how to redo things. Some things worked and some didn't. There's that famous story that I always share. We had a lesson plan on Tejano. And so because we were connected with the Tejano Monument Board, they gave us some money. And so the teacher used the plan and they prepared the kids for conversation by giving them all kinds of images and stories and stuff. And then finally they had the conversation. And one of the girls said, "But you know, I'm a girl. Can I be a Tejano?" We hadn't anticipated that. You know, and a white kid, an Anglo kid said, "You know, I'm not Mexican." And so the teacher was really creative and found out by that experience that of course the most important thing to teach at that moment was that you can be whoever you want. You know, that's what the lesson became. So they came back with those kinds of ideas. And so it's a partnership all the way through, a partnership at the level, institutional level, the district and so forth, but it's a partnership too among the people who are involved. Mm-hmm. And so we need everybody in there.
Yeah, we need everybody.
The students are very important, as that story indicates. You know, at all levels. I mean, these are fourth graders.
Yeah, so a moment ago you mentioned finding the right people. And when I hear you say that, I think of these people and the people that I work with. And I wonder, I guess I'm thinking about where parents fit in. I know at Guadalupe they're deeply involved in the work. I guess what I'm wondering has there been thought about, or is there a possibility for thinking about the parents as teachers who are literally carrying that culture a lot of times as their native culture, bringing that into the home, or they're actively teaching that in the home, you know, in so many cases, and have a great interest in the education of their children as having having a deep connection with the education that's happening at home. So I guess my question would be, how do we see parents becoming more involved as teachers, or as teacher assistants, or in some way legitimate parent engagement, family engagement, as opposed to packing boxes and things, which we see a lot, which is great, but there's so much wealth in these people that they could participate in this in a very legitimate and meaningful way.
Well, I'll have Dr. Chris Milk speak to that. I'll just say that I know Marisa has been coming, and we offer the instruction to the children and the parents, and because we all want to know our history, right? And so that's been a really nice part of the way that it's played out on site. But Chris, I know that you had a meeting even just last Saturday, right?
You're right. So we'll be meeting again on May 20th, and we'll connect about that. But I think one of the key things here, thinking particularly about that slide, is we've really shifted, or one of the key things in Nuestro Grupo is talking about all of us as educators. And so there's sort of a duality there, recognizing where we have undergraduates come and talk about how subtractive universities are for them and how they feel that they're not validated on campuses, and how coming to Nuestro Grupo and being part of this coalition makes everyone feel like someone that knowledge that is validated. So there's this whole idea of thinking of all of us as educators, whether you're an undergraduate, a family member, a professor, because a lot of UT professors feel not validated at UT, and that their knowledge is not important to UT. So recognizing that happens, while at the same time finding structural spaces where families have to get together, and thus the November 20th meeting, how do we actually make that real? So there's both the theoretical, and we're most definitely moving, we're creating a 3-year plan in order to actually put what is already happening in Nuestro Grupo and how do we actually implement it in the different spaces. So we're very much at the beginning spaces of going from the theoretical and turning it into implementation level.
I think, Principal Garcia, I know you've been working for many years now with parents. I don't know what you would, and we're solidifying the partnership, of course, with the Mexican American Culture Center as well. So parents are involved in the MAC as well, and they attend events. But maybe you can also.
It's a family event.
Yeah, as a family.
It's the younger siblings, right? It's the whole.
Right.
It involves the 4 families. So, no, I think it's great. I was actually thinking more of. It's very important in our community because we have a really rich, diverse Latin American population. So it's good to the response that we've gotten from the families is that they really enjoy it. We had some of the children, aside from the academia teachings, and we have the 16 de septiembre, the Hispanic Heritage Month kickoffs. So we've had a request for some of our students to speak because one year the inauguration of that week was at our school, of that month, excuse me. So the children that were selected to speak, oh my gosh, they had been academia students, and the things that they were empowered about, they were asked to speak about their, what it feels like for a 5th grader to be a Hispanic in school these days. And their voice just blossomed. So it's got a great, tremendous effect on the kiddos. It's something that needs to happen.
Thank you. See, I'm just learning this, so this is really super. I think we're probably like bumping up, right?
We can, I believe, I don't think there's anything happening in this room afterwards, but it is 1. So let's first thank
Thank you very much. Thank you, my colleagues. Students, thank you all so much for coming on a Friday when it's dead here, right? Just everything's.
So formally it's over, but please continue.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schaus. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Gracias. Gracias por venir.